Hey, Laura, how's it going? My name's Yanni. I'm also in class 5, finishing off this week, but dropping some PRs. I tend to do this in video form because I hate typing. So, to had a look at your shot. It's looking absolutely great. I really like the connection with two characters, and you've got two very clear personalities on them. There's a lot of fine little things in your shot that I love. There's loads of interesting little hand gestures and stuff like that, which just make the shot look absolutely great. So just gonna have a look through this a little bit frame by frame and have a look at things that are working or not working. Um, I think you've got a little eyelid movement over on frame 25, going to frame 27. So it's just this little pop that happens in the eye as she lowers her eyelid. And actually, I think that you don't need to have, that eyelid maybe closed as much when you actually start off your shot. I'm talking about the screen right character, by the way. So just round on the screen right character, around frame 25, have a look at the screen right eye, and there's a little eyelid dart that actually goes up a little bit. You really don't need that. You can either take it out or just change the pose slightly. Also, another thing that happens is that when she blinks and she looks over to her, it's a very, very, very short time that her eyes actually look towards her. Maybe you might want to see if you can maybe move the blink forward, back on the timeline. Maybe make it happen a few frames earlier with your head turn, and that way you can just go into there. The other thing that happens as well is that try to get the head turn that she's actually doing to be this little bit smoother, because she kind of like goes. She's got a coffee mug in her hand, and then there's a little bit of movement on the screen right to an extent as she kind of like moves her head and pushes up as well. I just think you might want to get that action just to be a little bit less exaggerated, so it's a little bit less busy on screen right frame when you come into frame 83. It's a bit of motion. It's not too bad, but I think that it just can be a little bit more relaxed around that area. And then looking at the other character, I love, the little detail of her playing around with her bag. I think the hand just feels that it's a little bit drifting on top of the hand a bit. You might want to try and see if you can actually make those contacts on the fingers just feel a little bit more solid, like that flip that she does with her thumb, like that. Her hand kind of like goes like that and then moves here. That just feels a bit forced to an extent. You'd almost want the thumb and the hand to actually grip something and move a bit more together as a unit as she comes up. So just really, really, really like feel to see if you can actually get that sense of the fingers actually passing on top of something. You'd almost want them to bend a little bit inwards like that if that's the motion that you're going for. So just have a look around on the screen left characters around frame 22 to 37. Try to see if you can polish out a little bit of those contacts a bit and make it feel like she's actually touching the object a bit more. And also because it's kind of like she's this little thing and then her hand goes back and is kind of like completely still on frame 75, so it's almost like you're trying to finish the motion before we get into the next shot. And I think that that's a little secondary motion that you just could keep until a few frames into this shot too. So it's that fumbling's just something that she's doing, and she stops at one point when she goes fathomable, and she has that surprised look on her face. Her hand stops up and then it can rest back down with the rest of her body as she comes back down again. I know, sorry, that's yeah, so she kind of like goes, I know. See if you can keep her screen right hand on shot 73 actually just a little bit engaged in that action that she was doing before, because it's a nice secondary thing for it to be there, but it just ends too quickly. I think you can push that a little bit further. So she comes up. Yeah, I'd say have a look at her expression, from frame 66 all the way to 71. You might want to delay and break this action up a little bit, because they're kind of like, you've got a good point for a squash in frame just on the take of frame 64. That's your squash pose. I know. as she comes up, you want that part where she actually comes up to in frame 71, that she's at the top, just give the eyebrows a little bit of an overshoot, so that you've got this nice kind of like, almost imagine it like the face like a bouncing ball, where it's I know, bank, and it kind of like builds up and settles a bit more, just to make the face feel a bit more elastic. So you can push that and exaggerate that a little bit. And then she comes back down again, nice squash pose over here. But just try to break everything that's happening up with the eyebrows, mouth, and the eyes as well. So they just happen on slightly different frames. So it can be the eyes open, the eyebrows overshoot, eyes close, and then eyebrows come down a bit more as well. So just try to break that up, because on that point, everything's kind of moving at the same time. Then you've got a frame on frame 83 where the screen left thumb is actually going through the bag. Bit of a rotation there, just clean that arc up a little bit, tiny thing. And then it happens again when she goes to put her hands back on the bag as well, and that's frame 105. Very nice overlap on the hands, that's great. Bum, 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 bum. You've got kind of like a very big eye motion over here, and she's almost changing her line of thought there, where she's fathomable. I'm saying it probably correct, but anyway, on frame 105, that's where her point of her thought process actually changes, and that big eye motion that you've got to frame 110, that really works, but add a blink in there, because it's like fathomable, it's just bunk. That little blink will just force that kind of like understanding of, oh, she's changed her line of thought, much more clearer than keeping her eyes open all the time. And then when she comes into frame 120 and she's got that spaced out look, just lower the eyelids a tiny bit, so we can just see the top of them again, getting that idea of squashing the face, of her going ooh, like that, just having this very tiny fleshy movement round the eyelids there. So just as the eyelids drop on frame 114 down to 118, just add a lit so we can see just the very top of the eyelids on the eyes there. And then just push it a bit further as well. And here on frame 138, you can take the bottom eyelids and move them up a little bit, and top eyelids and move them down just a little bit. Make her look a bit more. She looks very serious in this pose over here. So you might want to see if you actually do something like with the hands as well. So on a frame 134, you can just make the hands push in a little bit as she holds the bag, and gets her thought process kind of like a bit clearer there. Very nice blink change there. Love the smile, love the eyes, kind of like all of this stuff is great, really strong. Then coming through, nice lifting of the hand there. There's a bit of popping on the hand round frame 106. Bunk. I'm talking about the screen left hand there, because it's kind of like bump. There's kind of like a bit of a jarring motion over here, which when you play it back, it's not kind of like too jarring. But I think it's one of those things that you just kind of like want to kind of like maybe smooth out the wrist just a tiny bit, and get a bit of an arc. So even if the movement is a bit jarring, it's going da like that, instead of staying in place and doing that around there. So that's between frames 203 and 205. Hang on a sec, did I get that right? Sorry, my mistake. It's actually happening in frame 207, 209, 210, 211. There we go. So it's frame 209, 211 there. And then another thing that happens is also you've got a nice kind of like secondary action in frame 238 with her picking up the coffee cup and waving, but it just seems a bit cluttered to me, and I think that the shot actually works still if she has her hand either on the coffee cup already or on the table, so what I'm trying to say is that her screen right hand is doing something almost at the same time. There's like a couple frames difference between this gesture and her picking this up, and the shot will still work and she'll still feel alive even if there isn't any motion of her picking up the coffee cup at that point in time. So it just feels a bit that there's a little bit too much going on, and really what do we want to look at in your final shot? Well, it's probably her friend who's telling her, okay, settle down. And I think that the gesture on settle down could be just a little bit longer as well, which would help, because you've got, okay, settle down, and have the drop down of the hand be very, 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 very kind of like slow and forward as well. So you could just end the shot actually with her going, okay, settle down, and keep kind of like the hand up instead of taking it all the way back down to the table, so that everything's neat and tidy before we finish. Because I really think that the pose that you've got on frame 230, that's your final pose, pretty much. Few little things changing there, but you want to work within that pose at the end there. And for her friend, I really don't see anything that's kind of like too distracting or anything. I'm not too overly fond of the what's his name, the brow kind of like change that you've got in your shot there, just because it just feels a bit forced to an extent. So have a look at changing the brow kind of like shapes. So if she's looking down with her eyebrows like this and she's going to frown, make sure that you have another pose in between before she goes into that frown, so the face kind of like relaxes a bit, then frowns, and also keep the relationship with the upper eyelids and the shape of the eyes to actually change as well. So if she's changing, from that emotion, from that type of, smug look, frown, to a smug look there, you just want to make sure that the eyes don't have the same shape all the time as well. And I think kind of like, yeah, that would be my last comment there. I was looking at the mouth, but everything's fine there. So great. I mean, everything's looking great, lip sync wise and, performance wise, everything's there. There's some fantastic subtle stuff in this, I really, really, really love the way that your shot's going on. But anyway, hope it helps, and have a great week, keep in there. It's our last week to finish everything. So see you later. Take care.